Hello, I'm Kurma and welcome. In this series, we're going to show you how to cook a wide variety of international vegetarian cuisine from over 30 countries. And in this edition, we're going to show you how to prepare a Mediterranean-style lunch consisting of tomato rice with herbs, Italian fried cornbread, polenta, and Turkish nut pastries in syrup, baklava. So, let's begin. I thought I'd start off with a lovely Italian rice dish, tomato rice with herbs. A delightful combination of fluffy rice with tomatoes, fresh basil, olive oil, and some herbs. Let me show you the ingredients here for this delightful rice dish. Over here, we've got 1 cup of rice. We've got 1 teaspoonful of salt, 1 teaspoonful of paprika, a tablespoon of tomato paste, 2 tablespoons of fresh basil leaves. I'm going to chop these up. 2 tablespoons of olive oil. We've got half a teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder, 2 tablespoons of finely chopped parsley, a cup of firm tomatoes cut into half-inch cubes, and over there on the stove in a pot, you can hear it bubbling now. It's coming to the boil, 1 3/4 cups of water. Over here is a type of rice that you might like to use if you're making the traditional Italian-style risotto. This is called superfino arborio, and this is ideal for Italian risottos. It's a shorter grain rice than what I'm using today. It cooks in about 18 minutes and has a very nice high absorption rate, which means that the rice goes nice and flaky. But as I said, today I'm using basmati, so let's begin by popping a few ingredients into our pot over here. So as I said, our water's just come to the boil. I'm going to turn it down a wee bit so it's just bubbling. Over here in our pan, we're going to saute our rice in our olive oil. So let's also pop a flame underneath there and begin by pouring in our olive oil into our pan. Our virgin olive oil and our yellow asafoetida powder for a lovely savoury fragrance. And straight after our asafoetida goes in, we're going to pop in our rice, our basmati rice. Wonderful fragrance here. Let's toast this up. We need to gently toast our rice for a couple of minutes. Well, while we're sauteing our rice grains here, I'd like to pop over here and chop up our basil. The basil's going into the water along with a few of our other ingredients. It's good when you're making the rice absorption method. You should always have the water boiling and the rice cooking at the same time. We're not going very fast, so I think I can look after the rice. But let's chop up our basil leaves here. They're so nice I don't feel like chopping them up. They're very attractive looking leaves indeed. Let's bunch them all together here on our board. Give them a quick chop up. Like so. Okay, let's take these over to our water, which is boiling, and let's plunge them in. This makes the rice wonderfully basil flavoured. Here we go. Lovely fresh basil leaves. And while we're there, let's add our salt, our paprika powder for a lovely red coloured rice. This is not the hot paprika, by the way. It's the sweet paprika. Let's turn this flame down a little bit, I think. We don't want it over boiling. And last but not least, we've got our tomato paste. Tripolo concentrato di pomodoro. Lovely tomato paste, that rich tomato flavour in the rice. Of course, we're going to fold in fresh tomatoes at the end. The reason I'm not cooking my tomatoes in the rice is because of course, they fall apart. So we're going to fold them in at the end so they stay whole. Let's have a look at our rice over here. It's looking pretty good. Maybe another 30 seconds or so, and it should be sufficiently toasted. It's going a sort of a whitish colour. This is the sign that the rice is roasted enough. It also has that lovely crunchy sound, squeaky crunch. When you stir it, that means the rice is sufficiently toasted. Let's grab our water now, which has come to the boil, and let's plunge it in. Now take a look here. The rice should come to a rapid boil. Now we're going to turn it down to a very low simmer. Watch the bubbles. Just breaking the surface. And we can pop the lid on. Well, we're going to cook our rice now on this tiny little flame, and after about 15 minutes I'm going to turn it off and leave it steaming for another 5 minutes so those grains are big and plump and flaky. Then after the rice is fully cooked, I'm going to fold in our tomato and our freshly chopped parsley, and we're going to serve our lovely Mediterranean style tomato rice with herbs. Well, excuse me, I'm going to clean up here a little bit. I'll see you in about 20 minutes or so. Oh, caught me taking a peek at the rice. Well, it is actually done. I turned it off about 7 minutes ago, so it should be nice and plump and flaky now. And we're just about to unveil it and fold in our lovely ingredients. Have a peek at our rice here. Come on, get really close and have a good look at all those lovely fluffy rice grains. Notice how they're all completely separate. If you're not sure whether the rice grains are done, you can always take a piece and squeeze it between your fingers, lovely and soft and flaky. So let's pop our parsley and our tomatoes in there now, shall we? Our lovely green parsley, a nice flavour too. And our tomatoes. And our tomatoes. Lovely red colour and also lovely fragrance and flavour. Fresh tomatoes. Let's fold all this in very carefully, like so. It's always good to serve this with a meal that contains little or no tomatoes for a nice contrast. There we are, not too much folding. Let's serve it out on our lovely platter here. This is our serving suggestion. A delightful plate of rice pulao. Italian style tomato rice with lovely fresh basil and tomato. And there you have it, tomato rice with herbs. I'm going to show you now how to make a lovely Italian style bread called polenta. Very, very famous and eaten all over the north of Italy. It's great served with a variety of different types of sauces or just as is. It's a wonderful suggestion for a Mediterranean style lunch or dinner or any meal, any time of the day. Wonderful stuff. I'm making a batch of tomato sauce right now to go with it. Let's have a look at polenta. It's over here on our platter in its raw state. These lovely yellow grains here. It's made from yellow maize or cornmeal, and as I said, it's grown mainly in the north of Italy, and dishes made from this stuff are also called polenta. It's a staple food of the northern states of Italy. Very, very versatile. It can be cooked in many, many ways. Whichever way you eat it, it first has to be prepared in a rather thick porridge-like substance. That's what we're going to do over here very soon. I've got my pot of water boiling just for that very task. Before I start though, I just want to show you quickly the ingredients for our polenta today. Very, very simple. Over here in the center, we have a batch of yellow cornmeal polenta. There's actually 3.5 cups here. And in these little bowls here in the front, we've got 2 teaspoons of salt, we've got 3 ounces, 90 grams of butter, and we've got 3 tablespoons of olive oil. So the first thing we're going to do is to plunge our polenta into our boiling water. There's 8 cups of boiling water here, and this has to be done straight away while the water is boiling, like so. And immediately you have to start stirring it like so. And of course, let's not forget our salt at this point, otherwise our polenta won't have much taste. Bung the salt in. So the first thing we have to do is to make sure there's no lumps in here. So we have to stir very vigorously. And I like to use a whisk for this job. So the idea now is to cook this into a very thick consistency porridge. I think we've whisked out all our potential lumps. There are no lumps at this point, which is good. We don't want a lumpy polenta. I've got my wooden spoon now, and I'm going to gradually stir this around over the next 10 minutes until it thickens up sufficiently so it passes the 1 spoon test. Well, here we are, still stirring, and our polenta is looking wonderful. Let's stand our spoon up, turn our flame off, and see if it passes the test. Well, there we are, a perfect batch of polenta. Our spoon is standing to attention here. It's not falling over to the side, so it's done. You can actually tell when the polenta is done also. It's super thick like this, and it has difficulty falling off the spoon. So what we're going to do now is pop it into our tray. Over here I have a tray which we're going to be using. I'm going to get my little brush here, brush it in to our olive oil, and oil the base and the sides of the tray so this polenta doesn't stick, like so. Right, now let's carefully bring our polenta over here. By the way, our tomato sauce is done to perfection. Turn that off. Let's spoon our polenta into our tray. Now it's important that you spoon your polenta in as soon as you can while it's still hot. If you let it cool down too much, it's going to be very tricky to move it around. So this all has to be done as soon as you think that your polenta is ready. This could be served right away with butter and cheese, and I can tell you it's fabulous. But if you want to go ahead and make different types of dishes with polenta, then you continue on from here. And I'm going to get my oil here, oil up my spatula so it doesn't stick. This makes the whole operation easier. Have a look. So I think that's about as far as we need to take it. Just make sure it's nice and smooth. It's tilting a bit over this side. There we go. Now what I do have over here is a batch of polenta that I made before. So let me pop this down here. Put our frying pan over here. We're going to be needing our frying pan very soon. I have a batch of polenta. This was made about 5 hours ago. I turned it out. At this point you can see it's quite malleable. That's the top of the tray. I turned it over for cutting purposes. Quite flexible. Now we're going to cut it up. I think at this point in time we'll cut it, say, halfway, in half this way, and about 7 chunks that way. So we'll have 14 pieces altogether. Then we're going to pan fry it in our frying pan. So let's begin to be very careful here and cut it up into nice pieces, like so. Pop these 2 little pieces aside. So there we have our nice chunks of polenta. So what we're going to do now is to fry them, pan fry them. This is the stage where you could really leave it up to your imagination. You could bake them in the oven, you can grill them, toast them, roast them, but we're going to pan fry them. Let's grab our cast iron pan here, move a few things out of the way. We're going to melt our butter and add our olive oil. We're going to cook our butter and oil together, or at least heat them up together, until the butter stops frothing. Okay, this is getting nice and hot now. Before we let our butter burn, let's pop our polenta in, shall we? Let's put a few chunks in at a time. Golden chunks of polenta. Looks like we're going to be doing 6 at a time. Well, our polentas are looking very nice and golden, but you came back a bit early, so I've only cooked this one batch, but I think that's sufficient. So when they get to this stage and they're lovely golden and crispy, crunchy on the outside, and the amazing thing is they don't soak up much oil or butter, by the way. They're just crunchy on the outside and they're nice and dry on the inside. We're going to take them out and pop them on our plate. Do a little serving suggestion here. Let's grab 2 of the nice looking ones, shall we? These 2 I think are nicest. Let's take them over here, pop them on there like that. We've got our lovely tomato sauce, cooked to perfection here. This is a wonderful suggestion here for a Mediterranean meal. Some lovely fried Italian cornbreads, tomato sauce. And there we have it. Sprinkle of Parmesan cheese on top, sprig of green parsley, for a wonderful serving suggestion of Italian pan-fried cornbreads, polenta. I'm going to show you now how to make a really, really special sweet. It's called baklava. Layers of crispy filo pastry filled with walnuts and soaked in a lemony, orange blossom flavoured, honey-scented syrup. It's mouth-watering and only for those who have a sweet tooth. Of course, the sweet tooths or teeth of the Middle Eastern people are well known. This particular sweet is famous all over the Middle East and Mediterranean areas. Actually, this recipe is from Turkey. There's Greek versions, there's also Middle Eastern versions. They vary a little bit. But they all contain this lovely filo pastry and nuts and lots of sweet things. Let's take a look at our ingredients here. We've got a roll of filo pastry. This is about 450 grams, 1 pound of filo. We've got 9 ounces, that's 250 grams of unsalted butter, which has been melted here in our pan. Over here we have the ingredients for our filling. A teaspoon of cinnamon powder, 1/4 cup of sugar, and we've got 9 ounces, 250 grams of walnuts, which we're going to chop up in our food processor. Now for our syrup, we have our ingredients down here on our front plate. We have 1 1/4 cups of sugar. We have a cup of water in the pan over here. We have 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, 1/4 cup of honey, and a tablespoon of lovely orange blossom water. So this recipe consists basically of 3 steps. The buttering and layering of the pastry in the tray. By the way, you'll need some sort of baking tray or casserole dish about this size. You can vary the size and you'll just have to cut the pastry according to fit it. So there's the layering of the pastry is one step. The other step in the recipe is making the filling, which doesn't take very long at all. And the other step is making the syrup to pour on top of the cooked pastry. So I think what we'll do to start with is to get our filling ground up. That means our walnuts should be grated up here in our machine. Alternatively, you could just chop them up with a knife. This is a tad quicker. There we are. We don't want to grind them up too much. They should be still a little coarse. Let's grab a bowl here, one underneath my bench. Pop our nuts into the bowl, like so. And we can move our machine out of the way. Into our nuts here, we're going to add a little bit of sugar. You might think this is not enough sugar to make a sweet pastry, but of course don't forget that lots and lots of sweet syrup is going to be poured on top. So just a little bit of sugar for this amount of nuts. Mix it all up, like so. And let's not forget our cinnamon powder to give it a lovely spicy flavour. Okay, so there we have our filling. That was quite straightforward. Let's put that aside over maybe here. So the next thing we're going to do is to assemble our pastry ingredients. Let's unroll our roll of filo pastry here, shall we? I had it wrapped up in our package so it wouldn't dry out. Kitchen atmospheres tend to dry out filo pastry, which is very, very delicate. Okay, so there's a batch of filo pastry which is unwrapped. Let's now measure the amount of pastry we need according to the size of the container. We're going to cut out the pastry to fit our container here. So let's make a little mark here, make a little mark there. Let's take our dish away. Got a very sharp knife. Let's run our knife all the way through, like so. And that pastry can be put aside, maybe over here. And we'll make a little cut this way, like so. Let's slip out our plastic sheet from underneath. And we have the pastry that we need for our baklava. Now let's pop our pastry over there, put our tray here. Let's grab our butter, turn off the flame. The butter's nice and melted. We're going to be using that for spreading onto our filo pastry. After you've melted your butter, you can transfer it into some container which is accessible. You'll need one pastry brush or something like that. We'll put our butter down here. We're going to be buttering each individual layer of pastry as it goes into our dish. So let's begin by taking some butter in our brush and buttering as liberally as possible the bottom of our tray, like so. Let's take one layer of filo pastry and very carefully place it on our dish, like so. As you can see, it's very fragile. Once we get it in there, there's no problems. Let's butter our filo with the liberal quantity of butter. No need to be stingy with the butter. Slap it on. So there's our first layer. Put about 30 of these sheets of pastry on, actually, about 15 on the bottom with butter in between each one. And then we're going to put our layer of filling, and then we're going to put our 15 sheets of buttered filo pastry on top. Let's gently place our nuts on our layers of filo here, because we can just pop it all in like so, and we can spread it out with our spoon carefully, just so there's a nice even layer of nuts on top of our pastry. That's pretty straightforward, like so. Just pat it down a little bit, I think, just to make sure it's nice and even. When you get to your top layer, you can put on a liberal amount of butter, and then we're going to proceed on with the next very interesting step, which takes a little bit of a steady hand. That is, we're going to cut up our pastry. You can't cut up the baklava after it's baked because it's crispy, crunchy. So we have to cut it up now. We need a sharp knife, a steady hand, and a good eye. And you can either cut it up into squares, or if you're a little bit adventurous, I'm feeling a little bit adventurous now, we're going to cut it up into diamonds, but let's give it a go here. To cut up into diamonds, we're going to cut one way straight and the other way at an angle. So let's try that, shall we? So let's cut along here. And at this point in time, you have to be sure that you cut right through to the base of the tray and right up to the other end. So that's all the lines that way. Let's cut it the other way now for our lovely diamond shapes. Like so. Be very careful now. Here we go. This is a wonderful knife, like a razor blade, as long as they don't slip. There we go. So now we're going to bake this on 180 degrees Celsius, 355 degrees Fahrenheit, a nice hot oven, for about 45 minutes until it's golden and puffed up. Sometimes if your oven is a little wonky, you might have to leave it in a little longer. The time is up to your oven. Basically, it should all be all puffed up and brown and golden on top, and then it's ready to come out, and we're going to pour our syrup on top, which we're going to do next. But first things first, let's bake it. Pop it in the center of the oven so it cooks evenly. Every now and again you can pop back and take a peek at it. Let's make our syrup now. Over here we've got our pot of water. Let's add our other ingredients. We've got our sugar, and our lemon juice. Let's stir it all in. Let's pop it over here on the stove and cook it, or should I say boil it, for about 5 minutes. This way the soup should be just the right consistency for pouring over our cooked baklava. Of course we're going to chill this in the meantime, so we'll need a bowl. We're going to pour our syrup into our bowl and put it in the fridge after it's done. There's a certain stage that your syrup should get to before you pour it into the baklava. If it's too thin, then you end up with a soggy baklava. So the standard is that you boil it for 5 minutes, and if you're not sure whether it's thick enough, you put your spoon into the syrup and take it out, and it should form a nice coating on the spoon. It should be quite sticky. A sticky syrup means you'll have a nice, sweet baklava that won't be soggy but nice and crisp. Well, here's our lovely thick baklava syrup. Just the right thickness now. It coats the spoon. Of course, we don't want to cook our syrup down too thick, otherwise you'll have a toffee textured baklava. Let's turn our flame off. It's been 5 minutes exactly. We're going to add our lovely scented water here, orange blossom water, and our honey. So I think what I'll do is pour our orange blossom water in right now and follow it straight behind with our honey, like so. Dissolve the honey, stir it around until it's all dissolved, like so, and pour it into our bowl here. Wonderful aroma here of honey and orange and lemon flavoured syrup. Magnificent. Gives that very traditional flavour to your baklava. Okay, so our syrup, that smell is overwhelming, is going in the fridge. Feast your eyes on this. Isn't that magnificent? You'll notice here on top everything's nice and golden and everything's pretty crispy and very, very light. So you can actually remove some of those layers, living dangerously here. But when you pour the syrup on, it all amalgamates. So that reminds me, here's our cold syrup. Let's pour in our cold syrup now onto the hot baklava. This, as I mentioned before, is the secret of success of a good batch of baklava. Here we go, pouring it as evenly as we can. Can you hear it making those lovely noises? That's the little baklavas sucking up all the syrup. We're sort of surprising them because they're not expecting all this cold syrup to be poured on top of them. Now they've sort of settled down a bit, they've got used to the idea. Right, well that's looking absolutely divine. Woo! It's cooked to perfection. Well, that's it for this edition of Cooking with Kurma. I do hope you'll enjoy preparing these dishes as much as I've enjoyed sharing them with you. Happy and healthy eating.